And I give the call to the Honourable Kyle McGinn.
Thank you, Madam President. I move the motion in my name.
Good motion.
This House notes the wage theft is a serious and ongoing concern in Western Australian workplaces because of its impacts on workers, particularly vulnerable workers and the employers that do the right thing by their workers, and commends the McGowan government on the establishment of the inquiry into wage theft that has been undertaken by the former Chief Commissioner of Western Australian Industrial Relations Commission, Tony Beach.
Members, the Honourable Kyle McGinn has moved the motion standing in his name. The question is the motion be agreed. The Honourable Kyle McGinn.
Thank you, Madam President. I am absolutely stoked to be standing up here today to kick off what I really hope is a great debate in this chamber for workers around Western Australia that have suffered from the pain of wage theft. It's very broad, the motion today, and I've done that on purpose to ensure that we get a good debate from all sides in this chamber and get an understanding of what this chamber thinks wage theft is, experiences that they've had in wage theft, and what members in this chamber believe we should actually do about wage theft. To me, wage theft is broad, and many workers in this state would have different views on their version of what wage theft is. Wage theft can include not just underpayment of hourly rates of pay, but also an employer requiring employees to work unpaid hours, not paying penalty rates or making unreasonable deductions out of an employee's paycheck, including cashback schemes, not providing employees employment entitlements such as leave or superannuation, or having sham contracting arrangements that can also be wage theft. Why is it that you provide a service as a worker and you can get ripped off by the employer? Why is it that you can be paid under the award rates of pay? Why is it that penalty rates can be rolled into your hourly rate and then you have to go back and find out if it passes the boot test at the Fair Work Commission? Mind you, you've got to get in line too because there's hundreds of other workers already checking that. To me, if you do a fair day's work, you deserve a fair day's pay. Plain and simple. The money should be in your account. I know this has happened to me and to many of my members when I was a union official, and it's damn right annoying, and these people's families have suffered financial stress because of it. Can you imagine that you've got loans and rent automatically set up in your account to come out on payday or the day after, and all of a sudden you don't get paid? You try to call the employer, he won't get back to you, she won't get back to you, and all of a sudden it gets overdrawn on your account and you've got to go and pay for it. Now, I'm not saying that if this happens one-off, that should be condemned and it's wage theft, and yes, potentially there is mistakes. But when it happens regularly, and I know from members when I was a union official it did happen regularly, there's a problem. It's wage theft. The money should be in your account, not the employer's. I remember many times when I was an apprentice living off bugger all, I had to pay rent, food, utilities, and obviously a six-pack for the weekend. And on many occasions I'd be standing at the ATM at the shop just up the road from my house, right on 6 p.m, and I'm smashing the ATM card in there to find out if my pay's gone in every 5 minutes. And you know, when it went in, it was you beauty. I'd spent it in about 5 minutes as well. But on the horror occasion that it didn't go in, my guts would churn. And lo and behold, I was paid on a Friday as well. So 6:30, 7 o'clock on a Friday night, I've just worked out I've got no money for the weekend. I've also got to go and tell the people I'm living with that I don't have money for rent, and they're going to have to wait for that. And then when you call them up on Monday, oh, it'll come, it'll happen, it'll happen. Sometimes it actually went on for over a week and I didn't get paid. Now, this is happening to apprentices and workers right across Australia, particularly I'm going to focus on Western Australia, every day. There's workers out there that are getting paid late, are missing rent, are going without food because the employers decided, there's many reasons. One of them I think was definitely offshoring their payrolls to places in India and other sort of places where they're paying bugger all for the staff. Not just offshoring our jobs, but now, you know, affecting how we get paid. It's unfair and it shouldn't be happening. I feel like I was lucky as I didn't have a home loan or a massive loan at the time to pay. But there are workers that have that to pay now that aren't as lucky as I was. It is ridiculous, and I will state it again, that you provide labour and you don't get paid on time. Employers can deliver their business model, but they can't deliver you a wage on time. Ridiculous. A good start would be stopping that offshore payroll system, absolutely. I think that's a disgrace and it's affecting families and it's affecting Aussie jobs. I come from a working class background, So when I talk about wage theft, I've been there. I've had my wages stolen. I can tell you it sucks, it's wrong, and I'm very proud that my government, the McGowan government, is making a start on putting the spotlight on these practices. When I was an apprentice, I know how badly I was treated. Back then, I was just happy to have a job. I was passionate about cooking. I never thought my boss would be ripping me off. I genuinely thought he'd give me a job. Seems like a nice guy. Big mistake. Unpaid hours. Well, we didn't call them back then. It wasn't called unpaid hours, it was called love time. Love time. So love time was expected of you at this workplace, Toscani's. It was a restaurant on the Gold Coast. You can imagine you're 18 years old, you're struggling to get a job, you get a job in what you enjoy, Mediterranean food, good restaurant. The employer was absolutely terrible. I used to have to give probably 10 to 15 hours a week of love time to the employer. And if I didn't provide that, love time, yes. So love time is unpaid hours of work. That's what it was called. Absolutely outrageous. I really do like it now when I look back and think, wow, we thought it was just a bit of a joke, but it was wage theft. And I used to complain to the head chef and say, mate, this is just ridiculous. I'm getting paid $250 a week. My pay's coming in late. You know, I can barely live off what I'm doing, but I'm doing all these extra hours. He goes, well, I'm doing extra hours too. So just put your head down and keep going. You know, you can go find a job somewhere else. You know, it's easy to say, mate, but it wasn't that easy to get a job when you're 18 years old on the Gold Coast and still trying to work life out. You know, and I think employers also play off passion of employees, definitely. I think young people especially go into a job with this vigour and this passion about, I want to give it a crack and nothing will stop me, and split shifts. You know, split shifts, you'd finish at 2 o'clock and start again at 4. In hospitality, between that 2 and 4 time, I found myself doing prep in the kitchen. I wasn't getting paid for it, but if I didn't do it then, it wasn't going to be done when I started at 4 o'clock and we weren't going to be ready for service because we were understaffed. Wage theft. So I could go on for a while. I only got a short debate and I've got much to say, so I might just move on from that. But I will mention that at the end of that 3 years I spent at that restaurant, they also, I found out they didn't pay my superannuation and they went bust, so I didn't get my annual leave. Wage theft again. Superannuation, wage theft. When I was an organiser for the MUA in the Pilbara, there was one case that sticks out to me massively. Sea West Marine Services in Port Hedland. They were an absolute disgrace. The boss, Glenn Hawes, should be locked up. He didn't pay superannuation for 3 years to his employees. 3 years. He had shelf companies with all these different names. Every time the taxation officer would get onto him, he'd change his name and get a new one approved. He'd move it to another licence. All the while, he had contracts with the Pilbara Port Authority, with the last government. Do you think anything was done? Not a thing. He also had contracts with the Seafarers Centre. The Seafarers Centre is actually a centre that looks after seafarers' rights for foreign seafarers. So whilst they're ferrying out there, picking up foreign seafarers off foreign ships, the blokes on them ships aren't getting paid superannuation. I fought long and hard to try and get that superannuation back for the employees. Tried every avenue. The ATO, tried legal proceedings, tried negotiating, mediation. This employer did not budge and the ATO did nothing. The PPA did nothing. And this employer was allowed to continue to operate. Now, when I was talking with the membership, it was bloody tough because they couldn't get another job because there was a downturn. So they're saying to me, we don't want this thing to blow up and the business to go under because otherwise we don't actually have a wage. So while superannuation's important, I don't want to lose my job, I need my income. And then there were times when they didn't get paid for 2 weeks because he was going and leveraging his business up the hilt just to pay wages. Then we find out he'd put everything in a family trust, separated it from the business, couldn't touch any of his assets. He's driving a brand new Land Cruiser down the beach in Shark Bay, couldn't give a rat's about his employees. For every one of them employees at Sea West now, and I know that's gone under finally, I say to you, this wage theft inquiry is going to go out there and put the spotlight on it. And we have to start looking after employees like you from a government perspective. Because when we were doing it as a union perspective, the rules were broken and we couldn't fix it. It was an absolute disgrace. So another case, again, my background being in the maritime sector, this one is even more disturbing, and this goes into, you couldn't tell I'm from the maritime sector. This one's really disturbing because this is happening today. We talk about wage theft, there's multiple forms. The wage theft of vulnerable workers employed by the likes of Cowtex, Domino's and 7-Eleven are well documented. But we have an equally insidious, institutionalised forms of wage theft occurring in a resource sector in Western Australia. One company which is at the cutting edge of wage theft in the offshore, particularly in the hydrocarbon sector where they've just entered, is Monadelphous. I'm sure everyone's heard of them before. This is a company, you'll probably be thinking a bit differently of them after you hear what I've got to say. This is a company that had $1.3 billion in revenue in 2015-16 and paid just 14.6% tax. The year before, in 2014-15, they had $1.8 billion in revenue and paid just 16.5% tax. A dodgy rort here, a dodgy rort there, and this outfit ends up paying less tax than you, the average Western Australian. They clearly don't share their tax dodge with their workforce. Monos are new to WA offshore hydrocarbon sector, but since they have entered the scene, they have reduced the wages of hard-working, highly skilled Western Australians by 40%. 40%. They have done this, I can only assume, with the knowledge and the blessing of their clients, Woodside, Shell and Impex. Monadelphous and this rabble of multinationals have done a hatchet job on a group of workers who are amongst the most highly skilled workers in the world. One may ask how this outfit has done this. Well, they have gamed the system. They haven't negotiated any of the 4 enterprise agreements that they put in place for their offshore WA operations. Instead, they got 3 employees, each of their 4 sites, to sign off on an enterprise agreement which subsequently trapped hundreds of workers. No one got to negotiate these agreements at all. The rules are broken. Less than 0.25% of their workforce got to vote on these agreements. They were a sham and this is a scam. All but 3 workers, which included foreign visa workers, got to vote on these mono agreements. And these 3 workers only voted on the agreements on the basis that they believed they would lose their jobs if they didn't, under threat. Industrial extortion and standover tactics is the worst, particularly on vulnerable workers. And what sort of enterprise agreement did Monos ram down the throats of these highly skilled WA workers? A dodgy, substandard agreement is the answer. Today, if you are a trade-qualified, skilled maintenance worker for Monos on a Woodside offshore rig, you get paid roughly half the hourly rate you did a year ago. Half the hourly rate. For doing exactly the same work, the same job, the same client, the same rig. But because you now work for Monos and not Transfield, you get paid half. You also have no pay rises for 4 years and they remove of nearly all minimum award conditions. This is a disgraceful way to treat a WA tradesperson. And GSOs who work in a ticking time bomb in the middle of the ocean, not to mention the isolation and time away from your family. Monadelphous have rammed through this attack on wages and conditions through the subsidiary company MWOG. They have the Woodside maintenance contracts on the Goodwin A and the North Rankin platforms. The workers are paid by Monos Group Pty Ltd. Their long service leave is paid by Monos Engineering. Their group certificates is with MWOG as the employer and their superannuation is with Alesco. You tell me if that's not dodgy. You may as well question what is happening here, but it's clear that potentially the clients like Woodside haven't questioned them. Monadelphous' ability to avoid talking and negotiating or agreeing to collective outcomes with their workforce is a disgrace. Workplace laws which allow companies such as Monos to set up shelf companies and hand-pick 3 employees to vote up a below-standard enterprise agreement shows the rules are totally broken. The workplace laws have been busted open by the sugarhead gangsters and labour hire companies. Labour hire firms like Monadelphous use an employment model based on the churn factor. Every offshore worker employed by Monos is casual. Once again, flexibility is what they say, but they just run them out the door if they don't like the conditions. It's an absolute disgrace. Monos have mastered the art of employing workers in insecure work, and they force workers to pay their own training. On their own Impex facilities, they are even forced to pay for their maritime security identification cards, which is a requirement to have on board. Shell, Prelude and Woodside platforms, they stand workers down and leave them hanging out to dry with no incomes. But they can't get their rosters right. If it isn't for this country having strong trade unions, there would be a loan, and thankfully these workers have the Offshore Alliance and the ETU, which have done a great job in identifying the exploitative employment practices of monos. But it is important that the wage theft inquiry also takes on the responsibility and investigates these issues for Western Australian workers. I hope to get a bit more time because I've got a lot more to say, and I'm interested in hearing what the rest of the debate has to say in this chamber. Thank you.